The House Select Committee meant to investigate the insurrectionists on January 6th, the Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol. Well, they had their first day of hearings today, and we heard from Capitol police officers and members of the DC Metropolitan Police. Let's start off with the first video, which features Harry Dunn and Aquilino Ganell. Both of them are US Capitol police officers. They were there in the Capitol on the day that the Trump supporters had stormed it, and they wanted to share their perspective on what they went through. Let's watch.
The rioters attempted to breach the Capitol were shouting, "Trump, send us. Pick the right side. We want Trump."
As we came close to the terrorists, our line was divided and we came under attack. A man attempted to rip the baton from my hands and we wrestled for control. I retained my weapon after I pushed him back. He yelled at me, "You're on the wrong team."
I too was being crushed by the rioters. I could feel myself losing oxygen and recall thinking to myself, this is how I'm going to die.
He kicked me in my chest as we went to the ground. I was able to retain my baton again, but I ended up on my hands and knees and blind. The medical mask I was wearing at the time to protect myself from the coronavirus was pulled up over my eyes so I couldn't see. I braced myself against the impact of their blows and feared the worst.
On January 6th, for the first time, I was more afraid to work at the Capitol than my entire deployment to Iraq.
One man tried and failed to build a rapport with me, shouting, "Are you my brother?" Another takes a different tack, shouting, "You will die on your knees."
The rioters called me a traitor, a disgrace, and shouted that I, an army veteran and a police officer, should be executed.
The sea of people was punctuated throughout by flags, mostly variations of American flags and Trump flags. There was Gadsden flags. It was clear the terrorists perceived themselves to be Christians. I saw the Christian flag directly to my front. Another read, "Jesus is my savior, Trump is my president." To my perpetual confusion, I saw the thin blue line flag, a symbol of support for law enforcement, more than once being carried by the terrorists as they ignored our commands and continued to assault us.
So we have another video to get to in just a minute, but the testimony was definitely powerful. This is, in my opinion, more of a political, this is meant to serve more of a political purpose than anything else. We can talk about that. But Cenk, first, preliminary thoughts on what you saw.
Okay, so first the standard, Republicans don't live in the same reality we do. Look at what the guy said. He saw people with thin blue lives matter flags, or thin blue line flags, I should say, in the crowd as they're viciously attacking the cops. Because they're detached from reality. They're like, we gotta protect the cops, let's kill the cops. They hold those two thoughts in their heads at the same time. Well, then how are you going to talk to them? How are you going to reason with them? Obviously, they've let go of logic completely. So I guess the only way you could talk to them is through emotions, right? Like, you good, other people evil. Now look that way. And they go, oh, who do I attack? I attack cops, I hate cops, I love cops. What are you gonna do? They're morons, total, like, all right, so I'm the bad guy for calling them what they obviously are. I don't know if lunatic is more appropriate or moron. Anyway, look at these cops. So veterans, police officers, they did everything that the right wing asked them to do, that society asked them to do, and on. And it didn't matter. They wanted to, the guy said, you will die on your knees to a cop while pretending to be in favor of cops. That right there is the microcosm of the current day Republican Party.
I just think this country has reached a point where everything is about the individual and everything is either about survival or self-preservation. And what I mean by that is our political system is completely broken because you have an entire political party that refuses to abide by their own purported principles and values, and are more than willing to minimize something serious that happened in the Capitol in order to maintain their political careers, in order to ensure that they're not harassed by Trump's base. I think we're just past the point where we should expect people to do the right things.
There's no way. They're
Because
never gonna do it.
They're not gonna do the right thing. So what do we do now, right? Because we've seen the kind of commentary that's come out of the Republican Party. I mean, you have members of Congress, GOP lawmakers, saying over and over again that there was no big deal that day. It was Antifa. No, it wasn't Antifa. It was nothing actually. It was just like a regular group of tourists, just walking through the Capitol like any normal day. Like we've heard those kinds of arguments. Just these efforts to minimize what happened, and then you see people who are like, oh, we should also minimize it. I see people on the left who are like, we should also minimize it because there wasn't really a threat of people overthrowing the government. Okay, I get it. They're unorganized. They don't really have a strategy or a plan in place to effectively topple the government. I agree with that. But can we at least accept what their intentions were and also accept that what we're seeing in that video right next to me right now, that ain't normal. That ain't normal. We shouldn't minimize it. We should think about what it is in our culture right now that fuels that kind of behavior and makes people think that they're doing the right thing.
No, look, I am constantly torn on whether to talk about the fake left or not. I mean, if you think chanting about the execution of politicians as you storm the Capitol is a left-wing position, you might not understand anything in the world. So go ahead and join the right wing because you've also lost your mind.
I mean, if there's no big deal, I mean, would you be comfortable with someone doing that in your yard?
Like
people storming your house, talking about executing you? And I'm not suggesting anyone do that, but I'm just trying to, I think it's real easy to sit at a desk and minimize anything because you're trying to appeal to a niche audience, okay? But just think about if the shoe were on the other foot, if you had to deal with what people at the Capitol had to deal with that day, whether it's politicians or members of the Capitol Police or members of the DC Metro Police, that is not a small thing. And to minimize it is to essentially give it a pass.
Yeah, so I want to say one more thing about that. Look, the bigger issue here is, so the violence was a massive issue, them chanting about executions, looking for not just Mike Pence, but Nancy Pelosi and AOC. It's easy for you to say, well, I mean, they weren't trying to execute me, so I don't think it's a big deal, right? They didn't beat me over the head and threaten to murder me as they were dragging me down the stairs, so I don't think it's a big deal. So that's a very right-wing position, right? But the more important issue here is the underlying one, which is they didn't like that they lost the election. They were lied to by the right wing and sometimes aided and abetted by the fake left, right? That go on Tucker Carlson and kiss his ass and go, oh yeah, I mean, maybe these are American heroes who wanted to murder the politicians, right? So that is, and I don't, look, it's only a thought exercise in terms of like, can you have any kind of empathy for the people on the other side? Can you ever think of what if the shoe was on the other foot? God forbid, see if it was on the other foot for you guys, we would feel terrible and say, no, don't do that, because violence is abhorrent, anything physical is abhorrent. But now these guys go around and go, well, if you didn't win an election, obviously you try to go murder the other side. No, that's not obvious, that's not America at all. You guys are all traitors to the concept of America and democracy. But again, like this is all nuanced because they're brainwashed by their own media. So they really think like, oh my God, the election was stolen. We got to murder someone to make sure that we can undo it because we heard violence was the answer. We forgot the question, right? And by the way, it also requires a nuance on the Democratic side. Just because we think that was horrible what they did to the police, potentially the politicians, but most importantly, in my opinion, to our democracy, that doesn't mean we should agree to massive security in Washington with fences around the Capitol so no Americans could ever approach it, etc., right? You can say that was terrible and disagree on the solution. Please, let's use our minds.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, one of the concerns I had in regard to the formation of a commission to investigate this was that we were gonna get similar recommendations that we did after the 9/11 tragedy, right? There was a similar commission that was created and their recommendations were, let's bulk up our intelligence community, our intelligence agencies. They created the office of the director of national intelligence. So, and for me, obviously, additional security agencies or intelligence agencies are not gonna do the trick. There's a deeper problem here, and I don't want more surveillance into Americans and their personal lives. I wanna get to the second video though. The first video, as I mentioned, featured US Capitol Police. The next one features 2 cops from the DC Metropolitan Police. Let's watch.
One woman in a pink MAGA shirt yelled, "You hear that, guys? This voted for Joe Biden." Then the crowd, perhaps around 20 people, joined in screaming, "Boo!"
I was grabbed, beaten, tased, all while being called a traitor to my country. I was at risk of being stripped of and killed with my own firearm as I heard chants of kill him with his own gun.
No one had ever called me a while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer.
What makes the struggle harder and more painful is to know so many of my fellow citizens, including so many of the people I put my life at risk to defend, are downplaying or outright denying what happened.
One officer told me he had never, and in his entire 40 years of life, been called a to his face, and that streak ended on January 6th.
I feel like I went to hell and back to protect them and the people in this room. But too many are now telling me that hell doesn't exist, or that hell actually wasn't that bad. The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful.
Yet another black officer later told me he had been confronted by insurrectionists in the Capitol who told him, "Put your gun down and we'll show you what kind of you really are."
Nothing, truly nothing, has prepared me to address those elected members of our government who continue to deny the events of that day, and in doing so, betray their oath of office.
Now, I want you to think about that testimony and then consider the kind of commentary coming from the likes of Dinesh D'Souza after Tucker Carlson was calmly confronted by a man at a fly fishing store in Montana. Okay, when a man told Tucker Carlson that he's one of the worst people, the worst person on in the planet, something along those lines. Dinesh D'Souza called for his arrest.
Yeah.
For calmly speaking his mind to Tucker Carlson. What we're talking about here and what those cops are talking about in these videos is the violence that they had to withstand at the hands of these Capitol Hill rioters. And the right wing just wants to dismiss it and minimize it as if it's not a big deal, or it didn't happen at all, or there's some other nefarious figure behind it and not Donald Trump, who literally provoked the group right before they stormed the Capitol.
So look, I've never really agreed with it. It's not my place to agree or disagree with, but the policy of bleeping out the N-word, because when you hear it live, it is super ugly, and so there's that officer saying, you know, you're calling cops left and right the N-word, F and N-word, and talking about how if they put the gun down, they'll treat him like an N-word, right? So I gotta say it, and that's what folks want and stuff, but the actual word is so damn ugly, and seeing the officer say that without the bleeps, it's haunting, right? Yeah. And so that's what happened, and we just have we're in a situation I never expected in America, where some very significant percentage of the population has just let go of reality, and so we're just talking to each other now. They won't listen. They won't listen.
No, I know, and I don't know what the solution is. I don't think, not to be too pessimistic, I don't think anything will come from this select committee. I think that the Democrats are also partially doing this for political purposes because the midterms are coming up. But the question is, are Democrats going to actually make the most of it if they are using it for political purposes? Meaning, I mean, look, they did hearings on Donald Trump. There was, yes, the Mueller investigation, but there was also the investigation into Trump's quid pro quo with Ukraine, and they used none of that in their campaign, totally forgot about it, right? So are they gonna put people through this right now without actually accomplishing anything, without actually using it to, and I believe that they should do this, politically hurt the Republican Party, because they've enabled this, they've given a green light to this, they're gonna continue doing it. I mean, if you give them a pass now, it's just gonna get worse. Every election cycle, the Republican Party has consistently gotten worse. more vicious, more violent, more willing to lie to and gaslight the American people. And the thing that's incredibly frustrating is that on the other side, you have Democrats who will refer to them as a threat, who will fearmonger about them, I think in many cases justifiably. But then, as soon as they're in a position of power, they talk about playing patty cakes with them. Yeah. We need bipartisanship. Look at me, I can reach across the aisle and work with them. Yeah, but these are the people that are enabling the kind of brutality and violence that we saw in the Capitol that day, and they're gonna continue doing it. So make up your minds. Are they the enemy, and are you gonna hold them accountable, or are you gonna play patty cakes because you actually wanna do right by your corporate donors? That's the frustrating thing about this story, because we can see with our own two eyes what actually happened in the Capitol that day. But Democrats are incredibly weak and meek once their corporate donors tell them, sit down, work with the Republican Party to ensure that you protect our incentives and our profit structure.
So unfortunately, politics is all about marketing, and so here are police officers saying Trump supporters said that they wanted to execute me and that I was a traitor, etc. And yet, what is the marketing? The marketing is Democrats are against the police. Republicans say, I don't want you to investigate how the police were attacked, brutalized, and some killed. I don't want you. I don't care. I don't care what happened to the cops. And by the way, the Democrats are against the cops. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have to make sense, right? And the one thing I want to find out is, what did Trump do on that day?
Right.
Did he call in? That's the only thing I care about. Did he call in the National Guard or did he not? And if he didn't, why didn't he call the National Guard in? Why didn't he call any security in at all? When did he know that their lives were actually threatened? And then did he do anything from a security standpoint once he knew that other politicians might be murdered? Did he do anything at all? Now, I know it's not going to affect Trump supporters. First of all, they won't believe it. It doesn't matter. You can give them overwhelming evidence. You can have cops say it. They won't believe it. They won't believe anything, right? But it's important for the record to note: is this guy an actual tyrant that it doesn't mind people being killed in his name?
Yeah.
And so that we know the answer. I think we know the answer, but I'd like to know the evidence, right? I'd like to see the evidence. And so if they can unearth that evidence, I don't care what kind of marketing either side is trying to do. That would be relevant. You know why? Last thing is, because there's another election coming up. So that has two ramifications. Now, all across the country, if Republicans don't like who won, they just say the same thing Trump said. It was a lie. We think we won. We don't care what the reality is. We don't care what the vote counters say. We don't care what anybody says. Let's go kill somebody. Let's just go storm the Capitol. Remember they tried to kidnap and murder the governor of Michigan. We're all like whistling past the graveyard here. The violence is coming on a mass scale, especially if there's no accountability for this violence. And let alone when Trump runs in 2024, then it is going to be, the Wild Wild West is going to look like a day at the picnic if Trump runs again and urges his vigilantes to commit more violence.
No, don't underestimate the Republican Party's ability to find even more unhinged people to run for president. Because I remember thinking it can't get worse than George W. Bush. And to be sure, George W. Bush in many ways, especially with what he's done with foreign policy, is worse, right? But in terms of unhinged personalities, Donald Trump takes the cake. Who knows what's next? I thought Sarah Palin was pretty bad. Sarah Palin looks good compared to the unhinged stuff coming out of GOP lawmakers in Congress right now. It's unbelievable.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.